Hi, everyone. It's time for us to get started. I wanted to thank all of you who have joined us on time and some of you who joined before time as well. We still have a few people who are joining us. Our team's helping them log in. But in the interest of everyone's time, we'll get started with our September edition of our monthly webinars. This month's focus is talking about the shift from employee engagement to experience. Something I'm sure most of you through the year would have heard a lot about in one webinar or the other, or probably at a conference that you probably attended. Our focus today would be talking about helping you set up a people-first strategy and a people-first workplace. And just to keep that in line, we have a set agenda along the way as well. Before I jump in there, I just wanted to quickly introduce myself. As you can see at the bottom right-hand side of your screen, my name is Bhavan. I lead the growth team here at inFeedo. Coming from a varied background where I've been on your side as well as sold different sort of survey modules, and now talking about from an AI standpoint. My past experience includes working with Cvent, which is an event management software company, to LinkedIn prior to joining inFeedo. So a bit of experience. So if anyone wants to bounce off any ideas on what you guys are doing, we'd be happy to discuss those. Starting off on the agenda for today's webinar, we'll spend the first part of our webinar talking about the shift towards employee experience. We'll then spend a major chunk of today talking about building a people-first engagement strategy. We'll take a step back and we'll go back and reflect on what you guys are doing internally. That'll take us a couple of minutes. We've got two simple question exercise for you guys to fill out. Then our final agenda point will be talking about the role of AI and engagement bots and why a lot of companies are moving in that direction. And then we'll wrap up the webinar today with a quick ask me anything session for about 5 minutes. So if anyone has any questions, you can type in your questions, or you can just raise your hand. One of the panelists will unmute you, and we can help you get answers to your questions as well. So starting to the shift to employee experience. This slide that I've just opened up, I'm sure most of you have seen these numbers thrown at you all the time. We are all aware of these numbers. The cost of regrettable attrition, the cost of disengagement, all those millions and billions of dollars that people often talk about in such sessions. Today, our goal is not to talk about these sessions, but to really talk about what leads to these numbers. A lot of times when we are talking about attrition, our focus often goes to the cost of backfilling, the loss of productivity. A few things that often get ignored because those are more lagging indicators include the company knowledge that goes away with the employee who's departing, as well as the impact that has on that current team that's losing that employee as well. Imagine a situation where you're hiring continuously, you're training those people, and then they're leaving. If that happens repeatedly within the organization, that's a huge cost for you. As we all know, our workforce is evolving. With that, engagement should evolve as well. Before we talk about an evolving engagement, something we should reflect back upon is what really is engagement? How do we define engagement? If I ask this question to all the attendees today, I'm sure all of you would have your own definition of engagement. Engagement really is when your employees are aligned to the mission and vision of the company without any external pressure being put on them. They know what they're doing within the company. The next question then comes, why the shift towards experience? That's what we'll talk about probably in about 5 minutes from now. Talking right now, the essential key area is that most of our workforce now involves people with diverse and specialized skill sets. Now, for people like those, just having the same old practices of an annual survey or the same set of questions going to 1,000 people doesn't work anymore. These people require individual attention. These people require personalized outreaches. How do I ensure that every time I'm talking to an employee or a member of my workforce, my communication to them is tailored and is personalized to their needs? A research done by Jacob Morgan earlier in the year, and the report that they published actually showed that companies who were leading in these areas had employees who were performing far better than companies who were lagging or were still adopting those techniques. All these numbers that you see here are for US companies of employee size over 200. So you'll notice that companies that are investing in their employees, companies who are listening to what their employees are talking about, are noticing high profits as well as high profits per employee. So key metrics for you to take back here. If, like most people that our teams are talking to at the moment, if you are in the middle of strategizing and planning for 2020, right now you're deciding whether you want to go for an annual engagement survey, whether you want to go for a quarterly pulse check, or you want to do a mix of both. In such cases, a lot of times what happens is that what we ignore is that what the employee really wants. In either case, whether you choose an annual survey, whether you choose a quarterly survey, all we're looking for is data points. What we ignore though is the human emotion. What we ignore is the everyday experience that your employee is having when they're walking into the company. The voice of employee is something which is spoken about a lot. But what really is voice of employee? A term that was coined 27 years ago in 1991. Does that even work now? We're not even sure about it. And that's really what the key difference is. As you will notice here, Gartner published a research earlier in the year which spoke about how companies within the US are now trying to adopt alternate ways of gathering feedback from their employees rather than just relying on the annual surveys or even the quarterly surveys. At this point of time, we're at the intersection. Hopefully by next year, the adoption of alternate methods will be much higher than the annual employee survey. So what we've really spoken about is the current atmosphere. Now, before we start talking about how we build a people-first workplace, let's first of all take a step back and understand what employee experience really is. Like I said a few minutes ago, an employee experience is not celebrating birthdays or going out for picnics or celebrating the Halloween week. It's all about how your employee feels and experiences every day they walk into the workplace. Are they welcomed by their team? Do they understand what their manager expects from them? Does the manager expect what their subordinates expect from them? That's really what experience is. And that's where the best-in-class organizations are moving towards. Companies like a Pepsi, a GE, a Lenovo, that's the approach they're taking. Of the three ways to build a people-first workplace, the first one really is ensuring that the engagement happens at each phase of an employee's life cycle. From the day the employee joins till they continue to stay with you, the engagement keeps evolving with each passing year or each tenure touch point. You will notice here some of the organizations have a lot of touch points in the first year because they've realized that the maximum attrition happens in the first 1 year. That's where you as a company are spending the maximum effort on an employee in training them, in upskilling them so that they can prove as an asset to your company. If an employee is going through the entire process of training and then leaving the company, it just defeats the purpose of the entire onboarding and the training that has been designed for them. This is why it's so critical that at every aspect that you reach out to a particular employee, you ask relevant questions. If you've reached out to me on the 30-day mark, I want you to ask me questions around how am I feeling with the team? Have I had a chance to speak with my manager? How was my training or my onboarding? Whereas if you've reached out to me on my annual anniversary or a 1-year anniversary, I want you to ask me questions around my roles and responsibilities. What do I see the next for myself within the company? Or a simple question like, do I align myself with the mission and vision of the company? So the questions keep evolving the longer I stay with the organization. This ensures that I feel that someone human is talking to me. Talking about human, the next point being something which I think a lot of us talk about, but we're not sure how we replace the inhuman side of the service. Many companies that we talk to often rely on using anonymous surveys. They feel this is the best chance they can give an employee to open up and share any grievances they might have with their team, with their manager, or with the company, so they can be addressed. Something that gets defeated in the purpose is how do I address that individual's problem rather than just looking at holistic data or specific data points. Also, another key thing that a lot of people have pointed out is that surveys lose the historical context. So let's take the example of Andrew that you see here. If Andrew filled out a survey and another set of survey comes to him 90 days from now, or even 365 days from now, that survey will not take any historical conversation that Andrew had. Which means if Andrew was unhappy with something, dissatisfied with something, the survey will not take that into account. If I am Andrew, I don't know what happened to all the feedback I shared. If something happened, I want someone to acknowledge that we've got your feedback, let us work on it. And if things have improved, I want to tell someone that things have improved for me. A lot of times in our effort of reducing the bandwidth or that will be spent in filling out the survey, we only try to ask surface level questions without trying to dig in deeper, with the fear that the employee might not fill something out. As a result of which, not all data points that we capture are actionable or actually impact a major part of our workforce. Yes, there will be certain points that you'll be able to pick up from a voice of employee or an annual engagement survey that you will implement that impacts the workforce. But those key members of each team who aren't being impacted are just going from a green to a yellow to a red zone, ultimately leading for them to making an exit and walking out. Talking about exit comes the third part of the strategy, which talks about how you ensure that every employee's experience is tracked from the first day to the last day of them being within the company. We actually surveyed hundreds of companies and hundreds of HR leaders and executives to figure out when an employee is exiting, how much data do they look at? And the most common answer we got was the last 3 months, in some cases, the last 6 months. But what if the problem happened way before that? Are we able to address that as well? That's where a lot of the best-in-class organizations are stepping up the effort, where they're looking at the entire life cycle of an employee from the day they join to figure out where the real problem started so that they can address those problems for future employees. Or if Andrew, in this case, wanted to come back because he was an asset to his team, he doesn't face the same challenge again. In some cases, these companies are even saving employees like Andrew by ensuring whatever issues they face are getting resolved till it reaches that point. So these are the key 3 areas that we wanted to spend our time on today, talking about what companies are doing in terms of boosting employee experience and how they're making that shift from an engagement to an everyday experience point of view. What I want to do now, based on our agenda, just take a step back now and really allow you guys a chance to reflect back on your own organization strategy. There are 2 questions that we want you to answer, so it gives us an idea of the kind of audience that we have on the webinar today. Our first question is a simple option for you to choose from 1 to 5, where we're looking at for you to share on how likely your organization is ready to adopt technology to enhance employee experience. Just a quick rating from 1 to 5. Awesome. I can start seeing responses now coming in. Thank you, Sankalp. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Tonya. Lisa, thank you. Julia, thanks. I think most of the people have come back to us with responses. Quite a few responses now coming in. That now takes me to the second question. I think this is more relevant to a lot of people because you guys are in probably your final stages of planning or you've just sat down to plan for 2020. This makes it all the more relevant. The question is very simple. What is the #1 priority for you while you're evaluating an employee engagement solution? Now, that is not necessarily this year. Go back to historical context and think about it. What did you look at? Was it the ease of implementation? Was it a higher adoption amongst your users or the employees? Was it real-time insights? or was it a platform that could help you slice and dice all the data that you were capturing? Oh, this one's quicker. Everyone's been responding quicker. I think because we were in the middle of planning, everyone knew what their focus areas were. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. I really got a mixed bag, especially for question number 2. I do want to let you know that our highest rated was real-time insights and higher adoption. So there you go. These are the key things that people often look for. I also had someone talking about number 4, but number 3 being something for the future. Wow. So we have a mixed bag of responses. I hope the first 3 points just prior to this, the 3-pronged strategy helps you think about how we make the shift. It probably might not happen overnight, but something that you can definitely aim for. Now, let's talk about how AI, artificial intelligence, a buzzword these days, and engagement bots are filling this huge void that surveys are often leaving, and how companies are adopting it. A big fear that probably happened a couple of years ago when people started talking about AI was that AI was going to take jobs. That's not the purpose of AI. The purpose of AI is to aid every single person in getting more out of all the effort that they're putting in. This is probably the right time for me to introduce Amber. Amber is inFeedo's AI-based employee engagement bot. It's not a query answering bot. It's an out-and-out employee engagement bot that talks to your employees at set tenures, shows all the necessary sentiments that all of you in a one-on-one meeting would do with an employee, right from empathy to when she gets a good response, she'll always acknowledge it, to keeping historical context in mind every time she reaches out to an employee to make sure any past grievances were addressed. And that's where our whole goal of setting up Amber was to ensure that every employee's voice was heard and valued. As you notice here, I've just opened up a simple chat that an employee would have with Amber. And as the chat rolls in, I'll quickly talk to you guys on really how this works. Amber does not collect feedback anonymously because it defeats the purpose of addressing every employee as a real human, as a real individual. However, what she does is she starts every conversation with a trust statement so that the employee is confident that my feedback will only be handled by a select few people. They can click and actually see all the names. As you would probably be seeing on your screen, Amber shows all the necessary sentiments. So if I've raised a concern, she'll show empathy and try and dig in deeper. If I've given a good response, she'll always say something like, that's nice, with a smile, and move forward. And if she's reaching out to me the second time or the third time, she'll always have historical context in mind as well. Once I've gathered the feedback, what is in it there for the HR? What the HR does, outside of all the slicing and dicing and all the data that we will provide you to make actionable steps to take, we also proactively help you identify your at-risk and your disengaged employees. During conversations with each employee, Amber is able to gauge the mood and tell you who are the employees that you as the HR need to directly speak with, who are the employees who you can probably wait to speak with till the next conversation happens, but try and address their issue, and who are the employees who are really happy as well. So you don't need to worry about them, just focus on the high-risk employees. What she also does is picks up your high pose as well, your high-performing employees, so you can have specific focus on those people. Enough of me talking for the last 20 minutes or so. What I wanted to do as a next thing is just play a quick 2-minute video of the CEO of GE Healthcare talking about how they made the shift from employee engagement to employee experience. I hope it worked.
We have, as GE, over 350,000 employees. We operate in more than 160 countries. So we're extremely focused on the diversity. So our populations of employees truly represent the melting pot of the world.
What we wanted to do is, as things evolve, why not we stay ahead of the curve and really figure out how we can be more effective?
How do we enable people to, bring their best to work?
How can we really focus our efforts around understanding what's happening with employees using a different channel?
Even here in India, our employees are just really distributed. You're never going to have the direct connect enough. It'll never be enough. No matter how hard you work at it, it's not enough. So the idea that I'm interacting with something like Amber, I don't, and it's done so well, it feels human. It feels natural. The language is natural. It feels like I'm really talking to somebody who is listening to me. This is a way, I think, to cost effectively engage with employees on a more, and on their clock, not our clock, on their clock.
The population which has gone through this, there is a significant improvement on the engagement index, on how they relate to the strategy of the company. I think we'll move much faster. We'll make a huge difference in how we are a strategic partner for a business versus being seen as an administrative function which is there to support. It's not just the newcomers, or as we call them, millennials, who connect with Amber or embrace it. In our case, we have leveraged it with people with 40 years of experience.
Even though we're a 125-year-old company, I think it's been surprising how quickly it got adopted.
The data shows that people are engaging, they're sharing their feelings, the kind of things people have shared, the kind of responses we have received. It's phenomenal. It's significantly higher than the people who respond to any kind of survey. The HR team was unanimously accepted across different regions, so ASEAN, India, Africa. Very, very positive feedback, which was a huge surprise for me. HRMs are evolving and are focusing more on more value-adding work versus they being replaced.
The world is more and more uncertain. The pace of change is much faster. So I think our old established models just simply don't serve our employees as they once were able to. And I think, again, bringing Amber in and this whole idea of trying something different is a part of what we are as a culture.
I think the last 3 minutes, we were able to give you some idea of how GE took that step of moving away from the annual surveys to engagement, to having something which was more human, more continuous, and not just millennials lapped it up. Even employees who had 40 years experience love talking to Amber as well. And that's not just Amber, it's just the focus on AI as well. That concludes our presentation. Quickly recapping the 3 big points that we spoke about today, which was the backbone of today's webinar. How do we ensure a people-first workplace? First point, engagement should happen on the life cycle of your employee, personalizing across each touch point with historical context, and then measuring the experience of each employee from the first to the last day. I now leave the floor open for any questions that anyone might have, and we'll be happy to answer any questions. If you prefer talking rather than typing, just raise your hand, we'll unmute you, and you can ask your question. Julia, absolutely. You will get a link to this recording, and we'll go ahead and we'll share it probably in the next hour or so. Was there anything in specific that you liked on the presentation today? inFeedo as a company, we are complying to all necessary legal requirements, be it GDPR, be it ISO, all those certifications we already have. We have employees in over 46 countries at the moment talking to Amber on a regular basis across 100+ enterprises. So we'll be able to easily handle that. If there's anything specific, please let our team know. We'll be happy to answer. Tonya, I hope you got the answer to how did GE go ahead and implement this across regions. The product can be implemented as quickly as 2 weeks, but then it depends on the amount of contextualization that you might require, if there's any integrations required. On an average, it takes between 2 to 4 weeks from the day the contract is signed to the implementation happening. That also includes the launch period as well, where we announce the launch of Amber. Okay, the question I see here is, where is the data housed? The data is housed in the US. We use AWS. All the data is housed in the US. It's in North Virginia if you wanted the exact location as well. Tony, I hope that answers your question. Anything else? Perfect. We still have another 2 minutes, so if anyone has any final questions, feel free to go ahead and answer those. Just to let you guys know, there'll be a short 3-question survey sent to you. That's not a sales survey, that's just to get feedback on what you thought about the content, about me. Feel free to go ahead and type. Okay, so the question I see here is, how much learning does it require from a CHRO or an HRBP standpoint? If you're talking about how long it takes for you to get familiarized with the tool, we have a support team here who will train you when the tool is launched. Our platform is very, very easy and intuitive to use. Just to let you know, we have dedicated resources who will work with you to help you get all the insights. Usually the training and onboarding would take about 2 weeks from when you launch. I hope that answers your question. Thanks, Paul. Okay, so some of the common challenges that companies have had with our product. Now, let me think about them. I'm usually talking about the challenges that companies had before they launched Amber. To talk about challenges that they had when they launched the product, I'll just need a minute or so to think about some of the key things. I think the number one, Tony, the challenge that people face is the communication and how Amber is launched. This communication needs to be crystal clear, because if that doesn't happen, it becomes difficult. It becomes more of a push than a pull for people to respond. The biggest challenge I will say that companies often face is not acting on the feedback. If I'm an employee and I'm giving feedback to Amber, but nothing's happening with the feedback, I will start losing trust on it. And as a result of which, my responses, either I'll choose not to respond or just give out generic responses. So the work that HR does on the responses is the key thing. And I think the last one, something that I just realized, is the leadership not being involved. So the top 3 challenges I'd say would be the leadership, communication, and acting on the feedback. I have another question which says, does the product allow the company to respond? Could you just rephrase that question, please? Oh, yes, absolutely. So from within the platform, someone from my team will reach out and will show you how that works. Absolutely. So the HR is able to directly act on the feedback, schedule one-on-ones, and talk to the employee who's actually filled out the chat and address any concerns that they might have. So yes. Perfect. Thanks, Tonya. Any more questions? Last 1 minute. Seems like no more questions for anyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining in on the webinar today. Sorry, we're 1 minute over, but thank you so much. Have a nice day. Bye-bye. The link's coming through.